Normally I start the introduction here by saying I welcome the opportunity to contribute to a debate on this piece of legislation. But I have to start by saying tonight that we shouldn't even be here at debating this legislation at all. We're almost, as has been said by other speakers, we're almost 12 months to the day from when the Water Services No. 2 Bill 2013 was introduced and slashed through the House here and sparked a walkout of the opposition in protest at the ham-fisted way that the government was forcing it through this House. And I think that stance has been justified over what has happened over the last 12 months. When we see the outpouring of protest against Irish Water, when we see the litany of disasters that Irish Water has been involved in, from the setup costs, the costs of consultants, right through to how the metering programme has been introduced, into the fact, and in recent weeks we've discovered that the metering programme is actually going to cost €100 million more than was budgeted for within the department. And we've heard all sorts of lovely language from the government about how that was, what is the budget, what's projected, what's everything. But the fact is that it's going to cost €100 million more. And I would even say that it'll probably cost even more than that. Because what you're doing at the moment is metering, and it's a well-used phrase, but it's a phrase of you're picking the low-lying fruit. What you're doing at the moment is you're metering all the houses and all the properties that it's easy to get at, that where you know all the stopcocks are, where you know all the connections are, and the companies can just go in, stick on the meter and away again. When you get into metering the houses where the stopcocks are lost, where people don't know where they are, where you have to go digging along the side of the road, maybe for up to 30 or 40 or 50 metres to try and locate the connection, to be able to put on a meter on it, we'll see the costs actually spiral out of control, I would say. Donegal County Council and the non-domestic water metering programme installed 12,000 metres across the county a number of years ago. They had to borrow €9.7 million to do that, which worked out at a cost of somewhere in the region of about €805 per metre. Now you're saying that your projected cost of meters is going to be somewhere around about €300 per metre. There's a huge difference in that. And when you go across rural areas and rural parts of Ireland installing meters, those costs will continue to spiral. And that's just one example of the disaster that Irish Water is. And Irish Water, unfortunately, and I would be one person that had felt that the possibility of having a national utility to deal with water services actually made a bit of sense. Because there is a fact that the management costs built into the local authorities for water services are too burdensome and too expensive. There certainly isn't enough people working on the ground within water services to be able to provide an adequate service, but the local authorities were too top heavy in management costs. And I say this because I worked in water services myself for 16 years before I came into this House. And if the people don't re-elect me, hopefully we go back to work in water services as well. But it is a fact that water services have been starved of funding all down through the years. And it sickened me to listen to government ministers and government spokespersons talk about local authorities not investing in water services over the years. The reason that local authorities didn't invest in water services is because local authorities were not let. The Department of the Environment controlled every step along the way in the delivery of water projects across this country. Local authorities had the nominal role in prioritising. If the priorities didn't suit with what the department wanted, they were changed. And then the department controlled every step, and sanction had to be sought for every step along the road. And I'll give you an example. The treatment plant that I worked in Killybegs in County Donegal, the first surveys for the development of that treatment plant were done in 1972. The plant itself was opened in 1994, designed to meet 1991 requirements. And that was because the Department of the Environment held up every step along the road. And so the plant officially opened in 1994 at less capacity than it was designed to meet at that time. And the department held it up, held it up, held it up. And the same happens with every other project that Donegal County Council put forward. And that is not the fault of the councils, that's the fault of central government. So when central government is talking about local authorities not investing, what you should be talking about is that government didn't invest. And even during the times when there was plenty of money, and during the so-called Celtic Tiger and the boom times, That investment did not step up to meet the mark. It didn't step up to deliver for the citizens across this country. And I've heard the Minister reference today in his contribution a town like Bundoran in Donegal that continues to have raw sewage going into Donegal Bay. Killybegs is the same. But this government in this country is actually in breach of the Urban Wastewater Directive from the EU by not having solved those problems by this stage. Those plants were ready to go to tender and go to construction years ago. The money still hasn't been approved and sanctioned for it. Irish Water, even though it's there for a year and is supposed to have reviewed all the investment programmes, still hasn't sanctioned the commencement of the construction of those projects. And I think that's because they've been done as a design, build and operate project. You have Killybegs, Bundoran, Glencullen and Convoy schemes all being bundled to be handed out to a private contractor to deliver and operate on a maintenance contract for years afterwards. And it's interesting when you look at that and the creeping privatisation that's taking place within water services already, where we have Veolia, the French multinational, operating 3 plants in Donegal at the moment. And a number of years ago, before I finished up in Donegal County Council, almost 50% of the budget of the council for sewage services in Donegal was going to pay one company, pay Veolia, for running 3 treatment plants of service in 3 towns to pay them, where the rest of the county was managing on the same amount of money without any treatment or any adequate treatment. We have Severn Trent in Letterkenny developing a sewage treatment plant there at the moment. And I believe that if Irish Water continues and the service level agreements continue, that when they come up for renewal, while we may not see the overall privatisation of Irish Water, what we will see is Comreg demanding that the service level agreements be put to competitive tender, where you'll have the local authorities will be forced to tender for the service level agreements against the likes of Veolia and against the likes of Severn Trent and Celtic Anglian Water, who have been in the news recently in relation to NTR. So that is what I believe we'll see take place over the coming years. And so our government may not decide to actually privatise the whole thing, but the private companies will get the best of both worlds, because they will get maybe regional or county-based service level contracts from Irish Water to provide water services without any of the responsibility and without any of the demands for investment, but will be paid through the nose by us as citizens through our meters or our charges, if you get it through, to provide these services that could be provided by local authorities and should have been provided by local authorities over the many years. We've arrived today at the situation where you're bringing through this legislation now. As you say, it's because you've listened to people's concerns and responded to their concerns. And you say that the charging system that was introduced originally through Comreg was very cumbersome and difficult for people to understand. People understood fully what was happening with the charging system. They knew that was the thin end of the wedge. They knew that once you got the charges in and got them established, that the only way they would go was up. And they knew that was going to happen. The Minister says that, I heard the Taoiseach saying last week or the week before, when this momentous announcement was made of the changes and that led us to this bill, that the meter can be your friend, and then the meter can be a consumer's friend or a citizen's friend. Yeah, it'll be some friend to have, a friend that just costs you more and more all the time and milks you. Because your plan was to subvent Irish Water to the tune of €539 million for the next 3 or 4 years. And your plan then was to get rid of that subvention and put the costs onto Irish Water. So the costs of metering and the unit cost of water could only ever go up. And consumers can't make savings on the metering programme. I mean, the Minister talks about in his contribution today, where is it, that the metering programme, and we were told this all along, that there's so many leaks on connections across the country, and that there's huge amount of water going to loss, and there's 49% unaccounted for water in our water services. And the impression was given all along by government spokespersons that was the fault of the individual citizens and the individual households right across this country. And it's because of all this wastage on their service connections that we're in the situation that we're in. But the Minister actually came out and told a bit of the truth today, and I think he's even probably exaggerating it a wee bit, where he said that 10% of the national leakage level is attributable to service connections. 10%. So you're spending €539 million and possibly another couple of €100 million along with that to deal with 10% of the wastage problem in our country. Irish Water themselves estimate that the metering programme will only deal with 6% of the wastage across the country. So there we have a figure somewhere between 39 and 43% of water will still go to waste on the mains across the country after you have spent €540 million and more on delivering the metering programme. That shows the folly of what you're doing. That shows that the investment should have been made from day one in district metering and district control, because if you have a meter on a bulk main supply in a street or a house or an estate, that will catch the wastage and taking place in service connections. If you have a 100-house estate and you put on 100 half-inch meters on the connections into their houses, you won't fix one leak on the mains in that estate or street or town by doing that. You'll catch, at the Minister's own estimation, maybe 10% of the unaccounted for water, and that's all you'll catch. District metering and mains metering is the only way that you can do it. And investing in the staff on the ground to go out and actually detect the leaks, find them and fix them. And that is where you should have been spending your money. And if you were serious about getting the utility off the ground on a national basis, that's where you would have started and rolled it out in that way. And then you might have had some chance of maybe bringing the people along with you and having people buy into the concept of having a national utility. And then now we have a situation where we have Irish Water, a company that I don't believe any citizen in the state has any faith in. A company that has started off on the wrong foot and has got steadily worse. A company that has just that's a company, I believe, and a government, I believe, that fears the citizens of the state and fears the people. You had draconian measures included in the first bill for people who maybe wouldn't pay, who wouldn't register. You look for PPS numbers for people to provide for their children so that they could avail of the water allowance for children. And that was done because you simply did not trust the citizens in this state. From day one, all you had to do was ask people how many children under 18 are in your household and give them an allowance based on that. And you could have what you call your appropriate audit now to follow up on that. And if people were milking the system or people were trying to cheat the system, you could have dealt with it in that way. But you've made all these mistakes and you've delivered a company that nobody has any faith in. So for that reason, I believe that Irish Water should be disbanded, the metering programme should be cancelled, the charging programme should be cancelled, and you should provide water where it has always been provided for through local authorities, and provide local authorities with the means to be able to deliver the capital investment and the capital project that is needed for our system right across the board. And the Minister, one thing I would like to go back to Minister Kelly in his contribution on the 19th of November. One part of it he said that there will be no call-out service or charge. There had been a lot of negative publicity about the potential for Irish Water charging citizens for calling them out and this €188 figure. But what have you done? You've removed the service, the entire service, from the citizens as well. So if somebody has a problem now or suspects that there's a problem on the water system and they call out Irish Water, they get no customer service, absolutely none at all. When staff and local authorities, if they received a call from customers or consumers or citizens in relation to problems on their water system, would go out, look at it, tell them what it was, tell them how they had to go about it, and deal with it in that way. Indeed, in Donegal, if connections, we discovered that there was a leak on a connection, we'd advise the householder that it was their own problem. But in most cases, if they dug it, we fixed it for them. But that was customer service, and that's the level of customer service you should have been rolling out when you're starting to roll out Irish Water. And the Minister then talked about the cheapest water in Europe, and I mean, I think that's another sham, you know, when you talk about it only costing €1.15 per week. But in actual fact, the cheapest it'll be €3 per week, because people will still get a bill for €160 a year in a single person household. Now, if you give them the water conservation grant, that's €100 to do with whatever else they get, but they still will get a bill for €160. And two-person households will still get a bill for €260 from Irish Water. And dealing with the legislation itself, Section 1 of the legislation provides for the so-called plebiscite that the Minister talks about that will ensure that Irish Water will never be privatised. There's one thing that I would be concerned in it, and I'm not up to speed fully on the legal jargon or anything, but I see the word may put in there in terms of that the government may decide to have a plebiscite if they decide to alienate the shares in Irish Water. That to me doesn't sound like the government will or shall have a plebiscite. It sounds like a government can decide itself at some point in the future whether it wants to have it, and could possibly even find a way in the wording of the legislation to get around it at all. But the thing about the legislation is, and it's been said here by everybody here in this house, the thing about the legislation is that you can repeal it. The next government, if Fine Gael are in it, can repeal that legislation and just and do away with it completely, so that the need and the protection that's so-called built in there will never actually take place. What you could have done in your announcement on the 19th of November is that you could have announced that you will have a referendum to insert the right to water into their constitution. And then it would be a brave government that would actually stand up and have a referendum to appeal that at some stage in the future. And that would guarantee the right to citizens' ownership of water into the future. And that's the steps that you should have taken when you were looking at dealing with these concerns and issues that people had. The reason we're here today is because the citizens of this country have no faith in Irish Water. The citizens of this country have no faith in your government either. And that's why we're here today. The protests over the last couple of months, where we've seen probably close to 300,000 or 400,000 people on the streets at various stages opposing Irish Water, have also echoed with calls opposing the bank bailout, opposing the savage budgets that have been imposed on people over the last 6 years in this state, opposing the cuts that took place to young people on disability, the cuts that took place to lone parents, the cuts that took place to child benefit. Those are the reasons that people were out on the streets as well. And you haven't, and you won't be dealing with those reasons. And the only way that you can deal with those is to dissolve this government and have a general election so that the people can have their say. The reason that people have been out marching in such big numbers is because of this so-called democratic revolution that the Taoiseach talked about on the first day in this house, about how everything was going to change. But everything changed and nothing changed, and people are completely sickened with that. And I think the start of the rot was when Enda Kenny went to Davos in Switzerland in the first year of the government, where he was standing here in this house and telling people that this wasn't our debt, this was unfair, what was being done to us. Of course, we all partied away, and we all have responsibility for it. The exact opposite of what he actually was telling people here at home. And that showed the cynicism involved in the politics in this country. And that started the rot, where people were sickened by the cynicism from this government, by the cynicism of the political system. And that leads to the crisis now that the political parties are seeing that their role tumbling in the polls, and that the citizens of this country do not have any faith in the party system that operates in this Dáil, and an executive that dominates this Dáil and removes any independence from this house at all. So the only way that you can resolve this issue, and the only way that you can listen to people, and the only way that you can satisfy the citizens of this country is by dissolving this government and having a general election, and let the people then have their say on Irish Water.